Welcome to another episode of Cyber Coast to Coast. I'm Scott Schober from the East Coast here, and I want to welcome my brother from the West Coast. Craig, how you doing?
Hey, this is Craig on the West Coast coming at you from Long Beach, California, specifically. I'm doing fine. However, my wife is not. She tested positive for COVID and
Oh
is currently
no.
recovering. So we're living in a quarantined house, which is actually, half of the house is under quarantine, the other half I live in, kind of come and go. So it's an interesting. I kind of want to get a full hazmat suit and do the boy in the bubble thing and all that stuff, but her symptoms are beginning to subside, I think. So
Okay,
before
good.
before I can get the hazmat suit delivered, she'll probably be recovered. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think for the most part, it sounds like most people that have gotten it, fortunately, it's like a bad flu or cold, and once it passes, I personally haven't got it yet, and I'm hopeful I don't, but I don't wish it on anyone from the things I hear. But I think everywhere, or at least in New Jersey here, I'm hearing of people. Everybody knows somebody that has it or they've had it. So the good news is it seems like it's finally starting to lose the battle. A couple of weeks ago, it was up to 25,000 cases per day. When I checked earlier today, it's down to about 5,000 something cases per day. And they said, I think hospitalizations in New Jersey, this was specifically dropped 39%. That's a good sign because
yeah.
it's one thing when you're sick, but it's scary when someone goes to the hospital. And obviously, it's really sad when somebody passes from it. So just stay safe out there, everyone, and do the best you can to washing the hands and keeping your distance, quarantining like you're doing, Craig. Whatever it takes to stay safe and healthy, I think is important for everyone till we can get through this.
That's it. And yeah, we got some nice, the past couple shows we've been doing more kind of a mix of hardcore cybersecurity and consumer electronics and tech talk and stuff like that. But these are pretty strong cybersecurity focused topics we got. So we should get into them. But
Yeah,
before we
absolutely.
before we do, I just wanted to mention that this episode is sponsored by Cyberlytica. Cyberlytica brings customers, business, enterprise, proactive cybercrime intelligence, and you can learn more about them on cyberlytica.com. All right, what's this first story
Yeah,
here?
this first one I thought was kind of interesting, and actually, I discussed this week, and it was the selected headlines in cybercrime radio. I shared the headlines, and I thought it was a very interesting story because it was kind of a spin on the traditional ransomware. We always think about ransomware, and if I asked you, Craig, when you hear ransomware, what do you associate it with? Anything come to mind?
Oh, I think of state actors. I think of groups. I think of ransomware as a service that's becoming a
Hmm.
bigger thing.
Exactly.
Encrypted files, all that stuff that comes with ransomware, Bitcoin
Yeah.
payments.
Hmm. Yeah. So there's that financial aspect of it. And oftentimes it's state sponsored, at least a lot of the ones that we hear about, the big ones in the news. This one is kind of a little bit of a spin on it, and which was kind of interesting to me. And we've all heard about hacktivists, and this really comes from hacktivists. And I should say this was reported on initially by Ars Technica,
Mhm.
which puts out some great stories there. And hacktivists say that they hacked the Belarus rail systems to stop the Russian military buildup, which is kind of it catches my eyes when I read headlines like that. And this happened again this week. And we know about all the tension. Anybody that turns on the news has probably heard about it, be it radio or TV, internet. What's going on over there with Russia? And there's a buildup of troops and things like that on the border there of Ukraine. So it's a serious situation that could have uh, global implication, especially when we think about a war. I personally think that it's more likely that we're going to possibly see the initial stages of a cyber war as a result, kind of cyber World War III,
Mhm.
when people realize that such superpowers have the ability to cause so much damage with their weapons and troops. they may be more inclined to go to their keyboards and computers and inflict pain. So it could be more of a cyber warfare. And this is the first glimpse of it in that these hacktivists in Belarus, they infected a network of the country's state-run railroad system with ransomware. And they said, which was kind of funny, they would only provide the decryption key only if the Belarus president, Alexander Lukashenko, stopped aiding Russian troops ahead of the possible invasion of Ukraine. So this is kind of documented. This attack would be the first time ever where ransomware was used in this unique way. In a sense, they're kind of like an underdog, and they're using ransomware as a means of leverage. Yeah. And they showed it some proof through. If you read through the article, there was a couple screenshots there as well. And in the process, they showed like the website, the screen locked up, so people couldn't buy tickets to get on to the railway. They couldn't order online. It caused all kinds of challenges, I guess, for their entire Belarus railway system there.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I had to brush up a little bit on my geopolitical stuff, Eastern European. And when I looked at the map, I was like, how big is Belarus? Where are they exactly? And I looked and realized, okay, Ukraine is south of them. You got Poland kind of to the west of them. And then the east and northeast, you got this giant Russia. So I guess Russian troops starting to move into Ukraine for some kind of takeover or whatever military action. I guess Belarus is one of their main travel routes to get through, and now these hackers are saying, we don't want this to happen. We're going to block the railway system. We're going to cause disruption. And I thought it was funny, even in their tweet, they mention they required the release of 50 political prisoners, and they said the point of this is, like I said, to prevent Russian troops from moving freely through Belarus and into Ukraine. And they even went so far as to say that while they're disrupting ticketed passengers on this Belarus railway line, they're not going to affect the emergency safety mechanisms in place. So it does seem like it's a truly political demand. I'm sure everyone's got their own needs and desires when it comes to politics, things that we're not going to know about, of course. But it doesn't seem like there's any kind of money incentive here. It really does seem like kind of a political play.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And as you're mentioning that, I started to think, just to put it in perspective, I think about New Jersey, and I think we have somewhere around 9 million plus people here in the state of New Jersey. And that's about the size of Belarus as far as population, about 9 million some people. In contrast, Ukraine's got about 44 million people, and Russia, being, a huge country, 144 plus million people. So it kind of puts things in perspective a little bit when we think about troop movement and all this, getting things, logistics of moving things around, and how many lives potentially could be affected by these type of things. But it was interesting, again, that this was kind of a revolutionary struggle here, and how they're weaving in the use of ransomware for something like that.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of when one country creates these like economic sanctions against another country. They're not lobbing missiles over, they're not sending troops, but they're saying, these hacktivists are saying like, oh, we're going to disrupt you just enough so that you feel the pain economically. It's almost like cyber sanctions is going to become a new thing that we're going to see in cyber warfare in the future.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense, and that's the future of cyber is definitely changing. And I was reading some articles, and a new hot area, and I'd love to talk about this maybe next time, was some deception technology and other things like that are starting to be introduced into the world of cyber. So some interesting areas that are really popping up constantly. It kind of leads us to our next story, since we're talking about ransomware. And that seems to be, again, a daily headline, or the ransomware seems to be the most popular thing out there. But this story here comes from Bleeping Computer, and this was QNAP Force installs an update after Deadbolt ransomware, which is a particular strain of ransomware, hits 3,600 devices. Now QNAP is a quality network appliance provider, and what they do is provide comprehensive solutions in software development, hardware design. They have manufacturing, but I guess their core focus is really on storage and networking and things like that with cloud solutions and stuff. So they're kind of in the middle of the whole thing. And the article goes on to share that QNAP updated a customer's NAS, the network attached storage device, with firmware containing the latest security updates to protect against the Deadbolt ransomware. And it already encrypted about 3,600 devices. And then the update from Bleeping Computer was, I guess, earlier this week on Tuesday, they reported that this ransomware operation named Deadbolt was encrypting these devices worldwide. And the Deadbolt ransomware gang is trying to sell the full details of this alleged zero-day vulnerability to QNAP for 5 Bitcoins, which is estimated for about $185,000. Which I thought was an interesting little tidbit in the middle of that article there as I read that, because a lot of times we don't think about 0 days, but if you come across the 0 day where basically there's no known security or code to patch it, I guess you could say, a vulnerability that a hacker could take, and they could immediately exploit that vulnerability and make the maximum amount of money from companies. So they're very valuable. And in this case here, that they're trying to actually sell it for $185,000, make a big chunk of change and kind of get out of the business or something, or try some other things with it. It just was amazing. But more and more of these different strains of ransomware popping up each and every day, and the hackers just keep modifying them. Today's Deadbolt will change to something else tomorrow, when they'll change the scripts and the code a little bit so that they're tougher to actually to spot them, and it'll keep fooling people, unfortunately. So it's definitely a problem as ransomware is evolving.
Yeah, one of the standout points in this story to me wasn't so much the ransomware or the hackers. It was the response from QNAP themselves. They kind of forced a firmware security update on their users, even if the users had the auto update turned off, that you check that box when you want your that's kind of scary, because I don't know about you, but for me, I produce content. I rely on specific editing programs, all types of pro user apps, and when those things break, your work breaks. You can't get work done. It's a mess. So I try not to update too often, even though I do some bleeding edge updates. I like to buy new phones and stuff like that. And and if it's not a mission critical device, then sure, why not, upgrade to the latest OS? What's the worst that could happen? You just re-download it and you wipe it and start over again. But when you got tons of files from years of work and you have a project that's due, tomorrow, you can't take chances like that. So I thought that was a little scary. They said when I was looking through, it said the iSCSI connections. Remember SCSI connections back in the day? Yeah, I thought those were a thing of the past, but I guess they're still in use. Those were affecting some users because of that forced firmware update. And it goes on even further when I read, and it said that some of the people apparently paid for decryption. They paid the hackers, the ransomware, ahead of time, because they had mission, like I said, they had mission critical applications. They had to get that stuff going. And then as a result of the forced firmware update, they weren't able to decrypt the files now because it was pushed through. And now these poor people, they paid their Bitcoin and they can't even decrypt the files because it rendered that decryption screen that allowed them to go on to the next step. It removed that, so they couldn't. So now it's almost like QNAP is working against their own customers, and the customers are trying to work with the hackers, and they're being blocked, and it's a big mess. I'm sure it didn't affect a lot of people, but these things. I think it was it was an Apple issue, and it was a couple of years back. I think it was a 0-day exploit, and I'm probably wrong about this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it was related to text messaging, some kind of exploit and a thing where you could cause iPhones to crash or something like that. And as far as I know, it was the first case ever where Apple, and perhaps a big consumer electronics company like Apple, forced a firmware update. It was necessary. They probably made the right call because it was a security issue. But I remember that they forced it in the background, and that made everyone kind of pop their heads up and say, "Hey, wait a minute. We knew that this was possible theoretically. Apple, they hold the keys, they have a walled garden, they can do this kind of stuff, but we've never seen them actually do it. And here they went and did it for the first time. Is this going to become a reoccurring thing? Are they going to be just forcing iOS updates whenever they feel like it? I don't know. What about you? How long do you wait before you update your operating system?
You know, I got burned once a while back, and you probably remember me complaining about it. I took on an early update on one of the OSs, and I had nothing but problems, to the point where I was on the phone with Apple for hours. I couldn't get it to really resolve the problem. It was a disaster. Had to get a new machine finally because I had so many problems. So I've since become slow to update sometimes, even though in the world of cybersecurity, I'm always telling people patch, update your OS, I don't immediately do it. I like to read a little bit of the background and hear a couple people that said, "Hey, I did it and it's successful." So I look to you as the guinea pigs of the world and others. When I hear that, okay, you did it and it was successful, then okay, I'll jump on the bandwagon and do it. Now I know that I'm safe. But there's a little bit of inherent risk to unfortunately pressing that button and updating the second you see that the update's available. So I have to be careful that I practice what I preach when I tell people, yeah, you got to update and put your patches in. So what I'm trying to do is just read up on it to make sure, at least if I am going to hit that button immediately, I know what to expect and I can get some help to remediate it, and I'm not stuck in a corner, especially with some critical applications. You don't want to be out of work where you can't do something and accomplish anything. That could be a pain.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
This next story I wanted to jump into is kind of an interesting one. It comes from SecureWorks, and they put together a nice article that's entitled "The Cybersecurity Skills Gap." And you can kind of go out there on the web and do a quick search there. SecureWorks does some great stuff, and maybe just a little background on who SecureWorks is. They do cloud security and analytics, real world threat intelligence research. They do all kinds of stuff that allow you to detect advanced threats and investigate them and try to automate some of the things, which is really important in the world of cybersecurity today. So they're doing some great stuff there. But I had the privilege, they interviewed myself along with some other colleagues, and we got to talk a little bit about that cybersecurity skills gap, and especially how it comes into play with remote work and looking at the talent gap and how that impacts different trends and things. And I was curious about maybe even what some of your thoughts might be when you think about working remote, because you are working remote, and there's things that you need to keep in mind because you're not at headquarters, as far as security and best practices and things, which I think is important for anybody. And there's a lot of people listening into our show that are remote workers, and they're in the tech space or they're in the cyber space, and some of these things may come to mind. So any thoughts that stand out in your mind working remotely when you think about cybersecurity and stuff that you have to do that maybe you didn't think of or have to worry about as much when you're here at headquarters?
Nothing jumps at me off the top of my head specifically. For me, it's more of a general, it's kind of the out of sight, out of mind thing. I have to remind myself that when I'm not working in an office situation, that these people in that office are still affected by my actions outside of the office. I'm working remotely. I have to make sure I'm not, like, for instance, you were asking me today for we had some Wi-Fi issues, and you wanted the Wi-Fi password, and of course we're doing this over text. So my first inclination is just copy paste the password in the text message to you. And I know, and then you wrote, can you email it to me? And I was like, you know what? I would save a few seconds if I did it through the text message, but I'm going to email it to him because I'm pretty sure that email systems, at least the way we use them, compared to the way we use text systems in our, our specific setup, email's a little bit stronger. And well, and there's also other conveniences too, because we kind of both live on email and use
Yeah.
it to communicate and stuff, and that way. But I'm going to do that instead of just just doing a quick send over the text. And it's little things like that, you have to remind yourself to think about, because you don't see them in front of you and you don't talk to people and you don't have them asking, oh, can you just write this password on a post-it note, and those type of things. So
Yeah.
I guess that's where I think of it.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's kind of an interesting little standout point, because, and I always encourage people, if you're communicating, just like you mentioned, if we're texting back and forth, and anybody was able to hijack that conversation, and now you share a password in it, that could really be used against you. However, if in the conversation you tell someone to, in a sense, switch over to a different communication channel, yeah, I'll email it to you. They're unlikely that they hacked into your email and your phone at the same time. And hopefully with encryption in place and obscurity in a sense, and the timing element, it's a short burst, boom, it's gone. Although a lot of things are permanent in digital, so we have to be careful because it's stored somewhere out there. But I think it does help to spread things out a little bit and make it a little bit more difficult in a sense to track. I was thinking about just with COVID and many people in the workforce with cybersecurity, everybody's kind of stretched thin. And now when you have people working remotely, it can make it more challenging. And then also it was interesting in the article, the SecureWorks article, they're talking about some of the cybersecurity skills gap. They had me weigh in a little bit, just talking about some of the dynamics working remotely in your home. And again, I'm not working from my home, although I do have two hats. I go home and I'm a dad and to the family, but oftentimes I will jump on the computer and I'll do quotes at home or up at my cabin or wherever else. So I am working remotely, just not the traditional 9 to 5. It's really after hours. I tend to do it, but you're really more during normal work hours. You're home working from a remote office. And I'm curious what you think as far as family dynamics, because they say sometimes that could be challenging because you have to realize you're living a life, and there will be distractions and you have flexibility. But I'll notice even for you, sometimes you're not working necessarily 9 to 5, even on California time. You're working on the weekends. I'll see you're working late at night. Something will come over sometimes at 3 a.m. from me. And I'm thinking, man, I look the next day at the email and I'm like, gee, she was up late. So do you notice that work becomes kind of more hit or miss in patterns for you, and you have to adjust a little bit because of that?
Oh, definitely. I like that flexibility. I mean, I guess I like it both ways. When I used to come into the office 9 to 5, it's nice to have a focus, because it forces you to have a focus. You'll throw something on my desk and say, hey, we need this, this, and this. And I know I have a kind of a deadline, which is usually, same day or that week or something. And so I kind of do the mental checklist, this, and this. But I like to flex those other kind of muscles too, where you can allocate different projects and responsibilities to yourself based on your own convenience. So, I like to take our dog Tucker out on walks at certain times of day. I mean, she likes it, and I like to, do that for her. And I like to take her to the park and to the beach at certain times of day. Usually when the sun's out and it's warmer and it's nice, you get the nice weather. It's great. And so this way, I could kind of put my work kind of back, push it back, and hold it until later at night, when maybe there's not going to be anything on TV I care about that night. And so I know I could tackle these few projects, because I'm not going to be outside and I'm not going to be doing anything inside except work. So I think that's a good way to do that too. And also, it's nice. I think we're in a very privileged position that I have my own computer, and Kelly has her own computer. You
Mhm.
know, a lot of homes they have, especially
Share.
in other countries. Yeah, they'll have they'll literally have a phone as their primary device that the whole family shares. Like that's the
Yeah.
family computer. You know, that's why we see these big screen phones are so popular in these
Mhm.
giant, primarily Asian markets, and that stuff's spreading more and more to this country. But there's a lot of low income families that have to share a computer. Now, if you have two people working from home sharing that same computer, you can have all types of trouble as far as logging in with passwords and sharing desktop spaces and all those things. So those are things that have to be considered carefully by both the employer and employee.
Yeah, I think so. And when thinking about that, this cybersecurity skills gap, I guess when people are hiring, they really need to take into full consideration that there's going to be a percentage of people these days that probably need to work remotely, and they have to be able to adjust to this kind of new norm where you have to take into account, in other words, the person's family also, and what they like to do, and the timing and the flexibility. Because if you don't offer that, it's hard to really retain people these days. It is challenging. There is a shortage of workers, and in particular, the cybersecurity area. And to that point, I was thinking, what's going on a lot lately. I've gotten, just in the past few weeks, I think 3 different individuals that reached out to me and said, "Hey, Scott, I'm looking for work in the field of cybersecurity. Do you know any companies, or could you introduce me to anybody?" And so I'm always trying to at least help people and make introductions where it seems like there's an appropriate fit with the right niche. And then I encourage a lot of people to, especially if they're looking to go for schooling, maybe do a university for a degree, or perhaps they want to get certification in cybersecurity, that it's important to try to intern with a company that you can kind of get your hands dirty and practice some things. So not only do it on your own, build up your skill set on a computer, hacking a little bit and understanding how different things intertwine, but also being an intern and getting some real world experience while you're going to college, or while you're trying to qualify to take your certs exam or whatever. That way you're ready much quicker to be in the field. And I think those type of things really help when you're trying to get into a particular area. And too many people say, "Hey, I'm going to go to school for 2 years, 4 years, whatever period of time," and then they start the job hunt. I think it's so important that you really try to do it while you're in school, to see if you really like it and you enjoy it, and you can be challenged by it, as opposed to waiting too late. Then it's harder. Then you're competing with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man, neat stuff. So if somebody out there is listening in here to and thinking about the world of cybersecurity, you probably have, because it's crossed your mind. How secure is your computer, your smart device, this or that? Um, think about that. There is a huge need. Millions of people are needed in the field of cybersecurity. It's kind of like the call out a number of years ago to maybe nurses. There wasn't enough nurses. Now I think after this pandemic, there probably will be a huge shortage in that field too, doctors and nurses, because everybody's burned out
Hmm.
from all this COVID work. Well, the same thing I think in the world of cybersecurity. And especially, I hear a call out, and I've got a lot of great colleagues in cybersecurity that are women. They do some amazing things. There still is a shortage of women in cybersecurity. I think the last stat that I read, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 14% are women.
Right.
And that's way too low. So
Yeah,
it's something else there
you
to
did
keep
that
in
you
mind.
did that review. What was that? Women in Cyber. What was the book called again? That's the
Yeah, Women in Cyber.
Women in
It was
Cyber. Yeah.
a great book. Oh, I'm sorry, Women Know Cyber. I apologize.
All
And
right.
it's 100 fascinating females fighting cyber crime. And this was put out by Steve Morgan of Cybercrime Magazine, Cybersecurity Ventures, and D Freeze. So definitely check that out. Go to Amazon. Women Know Cyber: 100 fascinating females fighting cyber crime. I got my copy, and it was interesting because a lot of the colleagues in there, these women over time, I met at different shows, Black Hat, RSA, FutureCon, a lot of different great cyber events, and you learn a lot from them by this great read. So that's an important area, and hopefully, if you're a woman listening in, maybe you'll be the 100th, 101st, or 102nd woman in cyber. Just keep growing that list
Mhm.
as people enter into that field. You know what I was thinking? Just as we kind of wrap up here, the first two articles, and I was mentioning a lot of the headlines focus so much on ransomware, Craig. And I think it's important that we leave our audience with just a couple practical things when we think about ransomware, because if you're a small business owner, you're working in a large Fortune 500 company, you're in school, even at home, we all can be victimized by ransomware, oftentimes by just clicking on that link in a phishing email, by clicking on a link in an SMS text that we might get, whatever the case may be. So I wanted to run down and share a couple of thoughts, some tips to stay safe from ransomware. And feel free to jump in too. But I think if we start off just by something that all of us hear, and we're kind of grown numb to it, but I always talk to people about the importance of strong passwords. And when we say a strong password, we mean the difference between some people create a password that's 6 or 8 digits or characters that could be hacked by any automated password hacking tool in a matter of seconds. When you make a strong password, you really are making a password that is long and obscure and hard to remember. If that password is 12 to 15 characters, being a mixture of digits, uppercase, lowercase, and symbols, that will take years to hack and compromise, especially if there's no common words in it or nothing associated to you. So I would encourage people, think about your passwords when you're managing them. Use a good password manager. I love Dashlane. I use that. And a lot of people use different types of password managers. Find one that works for you so you can create and maintain strong passwords and keep them safe. And another tip is don't reuse the same password over multiple logins. Too many people still do that. More than 50% of the people that use internet and computers reuse the same password in multiple spots when they log in because they can remember it. That's a big no-no.
Yeah, when I think of passwords, to me, there's like 3 different types of passwords, or maybe it's 3 different types of people. I'm not sure, but there's like the real stupid ones, like monkey 123, that any hacker, you don't even need to run a password guessing program to do that. Like the hacker could literally just type in monkey 123 and that's it, And then there's the ones that are more like they're a little related to, maybe they have like your birthday in them or a name or your pet's name or something like that. So it's guessable if you know a little bit something about the person, but it's not that easy just off, right off the bat. Then there's the third type, which of course is the secure ones, random characters, special characters, upper lowercase, all that stuff. And those are, impossible to guess and virtually impossible for a computer to crack it, because it would take years to go through all those combinations to finally to get to that. And hackers have better things to do with their time than spend years on one password. They're going to go to the lowest hanging fruit. And so to me, those are the 3 different types of approaches to passwords, and I try to be the third in almost every case.
Yeah. Another tip to stay safe from ransomware, and this one is just balancing convenience versus security. Here, you want to opt on the side of security. In other words, it's going to take a little bit of time. Invest some time in this. 2-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication takes a little bit more time, not that much time, but it's really important. Having something besides just your traditional, your email or username and a password. You want to have something else in addition to that that can really authenticate that it is you that's logging in and not some hacker. That's really important. In fact, it reminds me, this week I had a really enjoyable interview on the radio with Zach Hack, a cybercrime radio. And there was a caller that called in, and he had his Facebook account hacked. And this was an elderly gentleman about in mid 70s. And I asked him, did he implement 2-factor authentication on, when he would log into Facebook? And he said, well, no. Takes too long. He didn't have a chance to, but going forward, he's going to start to. And again, that's nothing against him. That's a lot of people. That's everybody I hear that from. They just figure, well, who's going to hack me? I have nothing to hide. I don't have the time for it. But guess what? Now he's frustrated because not only was his account hacked, he unfortunately reused the same password across multiple logins. I found out he admitted
Oh,
to, and at least he was transparent about that, and we were trying to share practical tips to keep safe for everybody, not just somebody that's elderly, but more and more people I'm finding just aren't implementing two-factor authentication, and I really encourage people to consider that, because once you do, it's 10 times, it's 100 times more secure than just your traditional
mhm.
login. And you don't have to go through what that gentleman experienced, his frustration. We had several conversations. We've been emailing back and forth. In fact, I sent him a copy of Senior Cyber to share some other tips and things with him so he could stay safe on Facebook going forward. If he does go back to Facebook, he's so discouraged he may not. As well as just using his computer and the internet and for banking and other things. It's really important. Use two-factor authentication.
Oh yeah. I actually like two factor in most cases. Some cases it's a real pain.
Mhm.
But in most cases, especially in a Mac ecosystem, it as soon as you request that, PIN code or whatever, it will instantly send it to, usually in the form of a text message, and then it will autofill in. I click on it and it autofills in for me,
Mhm.
all within the browser, which is great because it takes it it feels like it's doing the work for me, and yet it's also secure. It's like you kind of get the best of
The
both
best of
worlds.
both worlds. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
I think that is good. The only challenge with some of the sites that I log into, secure sites, I've noticed sometimes when they're going to send the authenticator, be it a PIN code, a passcode, whatever it is, it doesn't happen right away.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
frustrating
and
sometimes.
and sometimes they don't, whatever the architecture of the website or however it's authored, it doesn't do an autofill, so I
Mhm.
have to go into my phone or look at my text
Yeah.
message on the computer, and then I got to sit there and memorize. I'm like, oh no, it's not 4 or 6 characters, it's 8 characters. I can't remember that, so I
You
keep
can't
looking
remember
back.
that
It's
many.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's that's the inconvenience where it comes in, but we still
Oh,
do it.
yeah. 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 We have to. The other thing I always encourage people to do as you start getting comfortable with using multi-factor authentication, have the means that it alerts you change it up a little bit. In other words, I don't always have it email me or text me. Sometimes I'll have it just like for Amazon. If I'm going to log in with two-factor authentication, I'll mix it up and say, okay, select in the list. I have different ways that I could be notified. Select in the list to call the landline,
Mhm.
and then it's an automated message that'll give me the specific one-time PIN code. Next time I do it, I'm going to have it text me. The next time I do it, I'll have it email me, or have it. Sometimes I'll have it, as crazy as it sounds, it'll go to you and then you send it to me.
Mhm.
Is it a little bit of obscurity? Sure. But sometimes that's the best way to be secure, because a hacker can't follow you when you have 3, 4, 5 different paths to get that authenticator. So
Yeah.
mix it up and keep them guessing.
you,
That's what
s-
I say.
you sound a little bit like the guy who's afraid he's being tailed, so he takes a
Yes.
different way to the market each time.
Yep, it works. It is. It's old school, but it does work. Another tip to share. I mean, we talked already about updates and security patches. It is important to do your research, keep on top of those, because that often will take care of the different strains of malware and things that will lead to a terrible ransomware attack. But another thing, and this is not exactly a tip to stay safe from ransomware, I like to point out, but it's just good cyber hygiene. Have a good backup. You got to back your computer up. I encourage what's called an immutable backup. That's a type of backup where it can't be modified or altered. You can't erase it or mess up the backup, because things like that happen. If you think about it statistically, I forget what the number was exactly, but it was something like 23 or 24% I read of backups don't work because people didn't back it up properly, or they can't restore their system properly. So basically, that's about a quarter of the backups. People that are spending all that time backing up their data, they're stuck. So if they get victimized by a ransomware attack, that's 1 in 4 people that resort to the backup. It don't work. So take your time, do it right. And I encourage you to disconnect it. Make sure your backup is offline. A lot of people do like cloud backups. They've gotten them much better and more secure. There have been some strains of ransomware that will infect the cloud backup as well. So you got to do your research there. Use a reputable company if you're going to. Really important.
Yeah.
And just a couple other things in wrapping up here, just the common sense stuff. Don't click on links. I mean, I don't know how many phishing emails you get, Craig, but I get them every single day, and they're tailored to look like, purchase orders or contracts that I get. But right away, when I see that it starts out with "Dear Sir,"
Right.
an email you don't recognize, something a little fishy, I stop immediately and quickly and run over to delete. Unfortunately, that's part of business anymore. The percentage of time that you're going through your junk mail, your physical mail, your email, the ones that look fishy, the emails, you got to take the time and do it, because all it takes is that one click when you're distracted or busy, and you fall victim.
Yeah, well, you're gonna hate me for this, but here's what I do. Since I like to see, I guess I learn by experiencing and seeing for myself and that kind of thing. So, of course, when I get some of the suspicious looking emails, I know they're not going to go anywhere. They're just, half of the time it's practically a dead link, or it's just like an old spam bot that's been, shooting out these fraudulent emails for years and stuff like that. But when I get one from, something that claims to be an Amazon or claims to be an Apple or Google, I will actually click on the link, because I know I live through my browser in so many ways. And so I know that the cookies are going to fill in. If I've ever been to this specific URL before, the cookies will fill that information in for me because I've been to it. So it's almost like a known trusted site. So naturally, when I go to these, wacko sites that are trying to skim my credit card or whatever they're trying to do, it's not going to fill in the information. So I'm always curious to see what these sites look like. How are they trying to trick me? Are there like these bizarre misspellings? Is it that weird kind of English to Japanese back to English translations that you see sometimes? And they're humorous. I like to look at them and laugh, but I think they can be a learning tool too, if you're very careful about it, because you never want to click on an executable. That's the worst thing you can do, because that's the thing that's going to take over your computer, and then it's game over from there. You got to throw the computer out or wipe it clean or something. So I'm never clicking on any attachments that's a .exe or any of those type of executables, but a link just to do kind of a casual browse to see what's over there, on the darker side of the web. I will do that occasionally just to see what what the latest is in trying to fool me.
Yeah, and I think it is important that you have the ability to do it, because part of it is awareness, and training helps keep us sharp, so we don't keep falling victim. What I do, and again, this is more maybe on the world of paranoia, I have a separate laptop that I use, that those type of things, if I'm curious and want to learn about a particular phishing scam, where does this take me to the site, this and that, or if I'm going to the dark web, I've got a computer that's set up with a specific VPN. I try to keep it dedicated for certain type of work. So if I am victimized, which I have been a few times, I can clean the machine. I could sandbox it in a sense, so it doesn't interrupt my personal life, and of course any of my business stuff. And sometimes we have to do that. We have to be able to separate those things, especially in the field of cyber, so you can stay safe. And so you don't end up victimized by some ransomware attack and it takes you down there. So it can be a challenge. So and maybe just in a final wrap up, I wanted to also throw in there, for companies out there, you should also consider looking into cyber insurance. I know that there's goods and bads with everything with insurance, but cyber insurance I always look at as a means to mitigate the risk. If you can do that carefully, what it'll end up actually doing, if you're paying a premium for a policy, it's going to force you, or hopefully the provider, the insurance provider, will force you to make sure that you're at least doing good cyber hygiene with passwords, with backups, shredding documents, all the things that you should be doing, having a secure website, a secure e-commerce site, encryption, backing up your data, a layered security approach. They get you thinking about all these things, because if you don't do those things and you fall victim to a breach, guess what? The cyber insurance is not going to do anything for you, because they're not going to pay out if you didn't follow the steps that you agreed upon. So it's kind of a forced way to discipline yourself to take a more secure posture in the world of cybersecurity. So I do think it's a good thing to mitigate the risk, and every company should have cyber insurance. And obviously it depends on what you're protecting, how valuable it is, so on and so forth. But it's something worth considering.
Yeah, it reminds me of like fire insurance too. Yeah. You're like, oh, do I really need to foot the bill for these fire extinguishers, and do I have to mount them in a specific area so I can get to them in my kitchen in case there's an oil fire, blah blah blah. But the economic incentive is there. If my house burns down or my company burns down and I didn't follow protocol, I'm not getting that check that's going to save my business or my home. So you can't underestimate the economic incentive that's in there for cyber insurance either.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, good. Well, it's just some great conversation this time, and just to remind our listeners that this episode of Cyber Coast to Coast was brought to you by Cyberlytica. We appreciate our sponsors, and Cyberlytica provides proactive cybercrime intelligence. If you want to learn a little bit more about Cyberlytica, visit cyberlytica.com. And just recently, I had a couple different people in the industry of cyber asking, hey, I'd love to be able to sponsor one of your segments in the future. So certainly, if somebody does want to sponsor a segment of Cyber Coast to Coast, Craig, what can they do? How could they reach out to you?
There's a million ways. We're on Twitter at BV Systems, or at Scott BVS, or at Hacked Again Book. Sorry, that's singular, not plural. Facebook /BV Systems. Of course, you can always email info@BV Systems. I check that mailbox every day, so I'm going to see anything like that. Or visit scottschober.com or bvsystems.com, and even in there, you'll see forms and all different ways that you can connect with us. And we will ask a question. Send a audio file. We'll play your little audio file question on our show, and we'll answer it right away. So there's more than ample ways to contact us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, you've been listening to Cyber Coast to Coast. This is Scott from the East Coast here in headquarters of Berkeley Varitronics, Metuchen, New Jersey, signing off. And great conversation. I look forward to catching up with you next week, Craig.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. This is Craig Schober from the West Coast signing out, and everyone stay safe.
Cyber Coast to Coast, with your hosts Scott and Craig Schober.